Imagine this nightmare scenario. You're sleeping peacefully in your own bed. Suddenly, explosions rip through your home. Smoke fills every room. Armed men in tactical gear burst through your door, screaming commands you can barely understand. They point guns at you and your partner. They drag you out of your house, half-dressed and terrified. Later, you discover the horrible truth. This wasn't even meant for you. The FBI raided the wrong house. Now here's the truly outrageous part. When you try to sue them, the government claims you can't. They say their agents had discretion in planning the raid. And because they had discretion, they can't be held responsible for getting it catastrophically wrong. Does that sound fair to you? The Supreme Court didn't think so either. In a rare moment of complete agreement, all 9 justices said no. This protection has limits. You can't hide behind discretion when you terrorize innocent people in their own home. This isn't some theoretical legal debate. This actually happened to a real family in suburban Atlanta, and their fight for justice just reached a critical turning point. Let me tell you their story. The year was 2017. Katrina Martin and her boyfriend were asleep in their home outside Atlanta. They had no idea that FBI agents were planning a pre-dawn raid in their neighborhood. The FBI had a legitimate mission that night. They were hunting suspected gang members who were hiding somewhere in the area. The agents had a specific address. They had a warrant. They had a plan. But somewhere between planning and execution, everything went horribly wrong. The special agent in charge made a critical decision. Instead of using official FBI navigation tools, he punched the address into his personal phone GPS. The team did some scouting before dawn. They drove through the area. They spotted a vehicle that seemed suspicious. They approached a house that looked right according to the GPS. But they never verified the address. The house had no visible numbers, according to the FBI. But here's the thing. They didn't check the mailbox. They didn't double-check with neighbors. They didn't take any extra steps to make absolutely certain they had the right location. Instead, they decided to go ahead with the raid. The FBI team smashed through the front door without warning. They detonated flashbang grenades inside the home. The explosions were deafening. Smoke filled the hallways. Inside, Katrina Martin and her boyfriend were terrified. Hearing the commotion, they had grabbed a shotgun and hidden in a closet, thinking their home was being invaded by criminals. In a sense, they were right to be scared. Armed agents swarmed through the house. They found the couple in the closet. They handcuffed them at gunpoint. They dragged Katrina out half-dressed. The couple had no idea what was happening or why. Then came the moment of truth. One of the agents was walking through the house when he noticed something on the coffee table. There was mail sitting there, and the address on that mail was different from their target address. The realization hit like a ton of bricks. They had raided the wrong house. The agents quickly told the traumatized family that a mistake had been made. They promised to come back and explain. Then they rushed out and went 3 doors down the street to execute the raid they should have done in the first place. Just like that, they were gone. And Katrina Martin and her boyfriend were left alone in their destroyed home, trying to process what had just happened to them. Most people would be devastated. Most people would feel helpless against the power of the federal government. But Katrina Martin and her family decided to fight back. They filed a lawsuit against the FBI under something called the Federal Tort Claims Act. This law is important because normally, you can't just sue the government. Government employees have protections like qualified immunity that shield them from most lawsuits. But Congress created the Federal Tort Claims Act specifically to give ordinary people a way to hold the government accountable when federal employees do something wrong while on the job. It's meant to level the playing field, at least a little bit. The Martin family thought their case was straightforward. The FBI made a terrible mistake. They terrorized innocent people. They caused real harm. Under normal circumstances, if anyone else broke into your home like this, you could sue them. So why should the FBI get a free pass? But the government had a different argument. The FBI claimed they were protected by something called the discretionary function exception. This is a loophole in the Federal Tort Claims Act that says you can't sue the government for decisions that involve discretion or judgment. The logic behind this exception makes some sense. The government shouldn't be sued every time an official makes a judgment call that doesn't work out perfectly. Otherwise, government employees would be too afraid to make any decisions at all. But the FBI took this protection to an extreme. They argued that using the personal GPS was a discretionary decision. Planning how to conduct the raid was discretionary. Deciding how to approach the house in the dark was discretionary. Choosing how to identify buildings by their external features was discretionary. In their view, pretty much everything about the raid involved discretion. And if everything involved discretion, then they couldn't be sued for any of it. Not even for raiding the wrong house and terrorizing an innocent family. The lower courts agreed with the FBI. They dismissed the Martin family's lawsuit. But the family refused to give up. They appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court agrees to hear a case, it's a big deal. They only accept about 1% of the cases that ask for review. The fact that they took this case meant the justices thought something important was at stake. And when they ruled, the result was stunning. All 9 justices agreed. Conservative justices and liberal justices. All of them said the same thing. The FBI's argument went too far. Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote the opinion for the unanimous court. He made it clear that the discretionary function exception has limits. It protects policy decisions and judgment calls about how to implement government programs. But it doesn't protect basic operational mistakes. Getting the address wrong isn't a policy decision. It's just incompetence. The Supreme Court threw out the lower court's ruling and sent the case back to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. They told that court to take another look at the case with fresh eyes and apply the law correctly. It was a complete victory for the Martin family. Or so it seemed. Here's where things get frustrating. The case is now back in the 11th Circuit. And instead of accepting the Supreme Court's ruling and moving toward a trial, the FBI is still fighting. The Department of Justice filed a new brief arguing that even though the Supreme Court rejected their first argument, they should still win for other reasons. They're claiming qualified immunity. They're making new technical arguments about the Federal Tort Claims Act. They're still trying to avoid any accountability for what happened. Their main argument hasn't really changed. They still claim that everything about how they conducted the raid involved discretionary decisions. How to do surveillance. How to approach in the dark. How to navigate without alerting suspects. How to identify buildings. According to the FBI, because no specific statute or regulation told them exactly how to do these things step by step, they had discretion. And because they had discretion, they can't be held liable. But the Martin family isn't backing down either. In their response brief, they argue that the FBI is completely missing the point. The Supreme Court already told the 11th Circuit to look at this case differently. The discretionary function exception protects genuine policy decisions, not basic screw-ups. Executing a warrant at the correct address isn't a policy decision. It's a basic requirement. It's a ministerial duty. There's no legitimate discretion to raid the wrong house. The family argues that what happened to them wasn't a policy choice. It was carelessness. It was reckless. It was unconstitutional. And it wasn't connected to any legitimate government policy. Raiding the wrong home and traumatizing innocent people isn't the kind of discretionary function the law was meant to protect. The Martin family wants the 11th Circuit to follow the Supreme Court's direction. They want the court to reject the FBI's expansive interpretation of immunity. They want their case sent back to the lower court for a full trial where they can present their evidence and hold the FBI accountable. The 11th Circuit has scheduled oral arguments for the week of March 23rd. Both sides will present their arguments to a panel of judges. Those judges will have to decide how to interpret the Supreme Court's ruling and what it means for this case. This matters far beyond just one family in Atlanta. The Supreme Court's ruling in this case narrows the government's ability to avoid lawsuits by claiming sweeping immunity. It reinforces a fundamental principle. The federal government and its agents can be held accountable when they misuse their powers and harm innocent people. But the FBI is still fighting. They're still trying to find ways around the Supreme Court's decision. They're still arguing that the 11th Circuit should rule in their favor, just for different reasons. That's why this case is so important to follow. It's about whether ordinary people have any real recourse when the government makes catastrophic mistakes. It's about whether powerful agencies can hide behind legal technicalities to avoid accountability. It's about whether justice means anything when you're up against the full force of federal law enforcement. The Martin family is still fighting for answers and accountability years after that terrifying night. And in the coming months, we'll find out whether the 11th Circuit truly takes the Supreme Court's message to heart, or whether the government finds yet another way to escape responsibility. As this case develops, I'll keep you updated on what happens, because this isn't just about one family or one botched raid. It's about fundamental questions of justice and accountability that affect every single one of us. The government has immense power, but that power must come with responsibility. And when innocent people are harmed, there must be a way to make things right. That's what this case is really about, and that's why it matters.